What's up, everyone? Welcome into an episode of the Orange Zone Overtime. I'm Samantha Croston, that's Ashley Wenskoski, and we're joining you after the Syracuse football spring game with a couple of takeaways from what we saw. Pretty cool opportunity. We both actually got the chance to be here. I was up in the press box, Ashley was down on the field. So maybe we'll just start there and tell people kind of what we saw. There was, I would say, probably over 10,000 people here, no?
Yeah, the lower bowl pretty filled up, of course. I would say it's like equivalent to a lacrosse crowd. That's what I said to you earlier. Maybe 5 to 8 to 10,000, kind of filling up the lower bowl. But I think the first obvious takeaway from this game was that no Rickie Collins, SU's quarterback that Fran Brown named QB1 earlier this week, not out there. And we found out pregame that it is a hand injury, but it's really precautionary. They're just not trying to push him. An SU spokesperson said that, you know, it's not anything that anyone should be concerned about heading into the summer or fall camp. He will be good to go. So whether or not they didn't want Collins out there for tape reasons, they didn't want to show too much, I just wanted to say it. Fran Brown sort of alluded to that post-game as well. Who's to say? But no Rickie Collins, but some people did impress in his absence.
I sort of did feel like I needed to bring that up once. Is it at least possible? I'm not saying, I believe, like this is not an accusation. I'm sure he does have a hand injury and it is precautionary. But is there another part or portion of this team or whatever, a decision that was made where they just don't want his film on tape?
Listen, I think there's something valuable about saying, right, everybody's talked about it. The inexperienced quarterback, the guy who's never been a starter heading into Tennessee and Atlanta to kick off the 2025 season in August. That's all very real. The other thing is, there's no tape out there on Rickie Collins.
I know.
There is a couple of, I think he had 7 touchdown passes in his time at LSU when he was a backup. Very, very little out there. So would it be out of the realm of possibility that they wanted to kind of shield some things? I don't think so. Now, of course, this game isn't televised. It was not on ACC Network. Pretty much all that will be out there is any content, you know, some local stations like us are providing you, or the ACC Network special that is set to drop sometimes after this game. But I don't think that's out of the realm.
Yeah, no, I agree. Especially when you consider the fact that, like you said, it's not broadcasted anywhere. CNY Central exclusive. No, it's not. but I do. I think that is in its own way a weapon that nobody really. You mentioned it. Collins played in a couple games with LSU, but he's a different quarterback now than he was then. So who knows what to expect? Either way, the point is, to Ashley's point, we got to see from some different people, and I will say, one quarterback that stuck out to me. From the bird's eye view in the press box was Ja'Carri Williams. I thought he really had a lot to offer. You know, a couple passes way downfield, maybe hitting, 45 yards or so. You know, not to say that no one out there was Kyle McCord. Let's just be honest about that. But there were flashes of greatness, I thought, from him.
Yeah, Ja'Carri Williams looked like a QB2. He looked like a guy who's going to be a QB1 at some point in his career, whether it's here or not, and that remains to be seen. But he was impressive. I mean, the redshirt freshman, he was out there hitting most of his targets. We saw him kind of have connections with a couple of the other younger receivers, Jalen Hornsby in there, Emmanuel Ross as well. So I think Ja'Carri impressed me. I think Fran Brown has spoken about that kind of 2-3 quarterback spot. It's going to be a little bit of a battle between really Ja'Carri and Michael Johnson Jr. Of course, Johnson Jr. has the seniority. He's the veteran, right? He's been to Penn State, FAU, multiple schools. But I think it's hard to see Ja'Carri and his upside, and as a coaching staff, not want to do everything that you can to keep him here, especially when the transfer portal is a real concern. Now, is a backup number 2 spot enough to keep him here? That remains to be seen.
I agree with that, but here's the other thing. Fran Brown has made it very clear, at least to me, that being the number 2 quarterback on this team is a really big role and a really big responsibility. I'm not saying that that's not true everywhere, but the case here, it really feels like, he's mentioned a couple times that you had to battle for that number 2 spot. And if you want to be secure in that number 2 spot, you're going to have to fight for it every day. I feel like Fran Brown as a coach makes even the number 2 quarterback feel very valuable. So it wouldn't shock me if that ends up being enough to stay. As far as Johnson Jr., he, to me, just seemed like a completely different kind of quarterback. Relatively mobile, so that's one thing that stuck out to me, but I agree with you. Having somebody who, there's a couple of years that you can continue to develop the player, especially in the transfer portal era, it really matters.
Yeah, and I think we've spoken about it on a few of our recent episodes, right? The reality is that Collins has never been a starter before. You don't exactly know what you're getting out of Rickie Collins. So to your point, the backup quarterback on this version, this 2025 version of Syracuse football, is honestly more important than ever before. Of course, there's the injury risk. It's rare to see a college football quarterback get all the way through the season without injury. And then, of course, there's just the unknown sort of question mark of Collins and what he's going to be. So I agree with you that that spot and that role is a little bit more valuable this year than it may have been in years past.
All right, we're also going to tell you guys just some things that happened in the game because, like we said, there's not going to be highlights of it, from the ACC network or whatnot. So who scored here today? We had Yasin Willis.
Yes.
He scored. Jaden O, I feel like maybe had more points than anybody.
Yeah, the field goals out here. This was a field goal heavy game.
Yep, it was. And just looking to see if there's anyone else who stuck out to me. Emmanuel Ross, he also scored today. I would say that, the wide receiver group in general left me with the most A, questions, but also B, hope.
Yeah, I think the wide receiver group remains probably the deepest position group on this team, and I think that kind of receiving core, that carries over from last year, right? We saw last year's receivers, along with some tight ends in Arande Gadsden, Dan Villari, really be the biggest source of depth on this team, and I think that's going to remain true this year, even though they've lost a lot of those pieces. Obviously, Trevor Pena is your number one guy, wide receiver one. He was in a white jersey today. Fran Brown keeping some of his starters, not out there as much. Even Yasin Willis kind of played that first drive and then didn't play after that. Pena among that group, Dan Villari, and others. So you saw him try to shield some of his veteran, definite starters and let the young guys play. But to your point about the receivers, obviously you've got Pena. Then you have younger freshmen, redshirt freshmen in some cases, guys like Emmanuel Ross, like Jalen Hornsby, who really impressed today. Justice Ross Simmons out there with a couple of first downs. He impressed as well. We saw flashes from him last season after he came back from his injury. You still have a guy like Villari. You have a guy like Jamie Tremble in the tight end room that I know they want to see grow this season into maybe an Arande Gadsden caliber of player at some point. So you're definitely still going to have a ton of options in the receiver room. And then there's guys who weren't even here today, such as Darrell Gill Jr., who's actually with the SU track team at a meet because he's running track this year.
The track football crossover is just unbelievable.
Remarkable.
Let me just say that.
Remarkable.
But no, I totally agree. I think this year is going to bring some interesting things because you have that blend of some guys who are those solidified starters, leaders, captains, but you're going to see a lot of new faces too. I will say, that's sort of the positive. On the negative side of things, were there some miscues? I'd most definitely say that. Like, this was not a clean game by any means.
No, I mean, I think, so we touched on the quarterback situation. He had Jakari out there, he had Johnson Jr. out there, but then they really let every quarterback play. I mean, this is the first time that we've seen the likes of some of these freshmen, Luke Carney, a recruit out of Texas that really just got here in the spring, Rich Beelan and other people like that kind of get out there, AJ Miller, guys that fans probably don't even know their names because they're that far down on the depth chart. So to have those guys out there, of course, there's going to be sort of, miscues, snaps, penalties. Fran Brown said he wanted to see some of that stuff cleaned up post-game. And you're going to see that from any football team, in April. But I think when you leave the spring game and that's one of the things you're looking to clean up, you're already ahead of the curve a little bit. I will say it's going to be interesting to me, and I know this is something that fans are going to be interested in as well, to sort of see who steps up on defense this year. There's been a lot made of, no more Kyle McCord. And, of course, that's the headline on offense. But defensively, there's also no more Marlo Axe and no more Justin Barron, and those are the two guys that have been the stronghold of this defense for 4 to 5 years. Of course, Derek McDonald's still out there. You're seeing some younger guys step up. Jaleel Martin kind of picked up right where he left off from the Holiday Bowl with another interception, which Fran Brown said was the same exact play as his interception in the Holiday Bowl. So you're seeing flashes, right? Even an edge guy, pass rusher like King Joseph Edwards. Brown saying that he's really even developed in the last few weeks, maturity-wise. You're seeing flashes and you're seeing possibilities of guys able to grow in that role, but I don't think I'm ready to say that, this is your number one defensive leader. I don't think the defense really has that guy as of right now.
Yeah, listen, it's too early almost to say anything. Like, I almost feel like my biggest takeaway, and I know this is maybe disappointing to people, is that there's just still so much we don't know.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I really walk away from today knowing a whole lot about the team that I'm going to see in the fall.
Right.
Because, like you said, all of the guys who you really needed to see and wanted to see were sidelined or semi-sidelined.
Yeah.
That being said, and I hope I'm wrong about this, but I'll say it just to make a too early prediction. If I'm being honest, this team strikes me as it could be a rebuilding year. It strikes me as a 6, maybe 7 win team with the schedule.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want that to be true, and I'm not even encouraging people to manage their expectations. I'm just saying, I think today what it showed me is how many new faces people are going to have to get used to.
Yeah, definitely.
And how much was lost.
Right. I think there is going to be an adjustment period in 2025, whether that's at Tennessee, whether that's in that non-conference portion of the schedule, whenever it is. I think for fans to kind of, take in how many pieces left last year, even down to, guys like John Ray Reed, who was the starting center all last year that you're not even thinking about right now because you're thinking about all the big names who left. So I agree with you. I think this is a team that could be young. It could be scrappy. It's certainly going to be hungry. Fran Brown's the coach. But I agree that maybe this is a team that really has to gel together sort of in fall camp and heading into the season to really see what they are. And I think anytime you have a new offense, which is what it's going to be under Rickie Collins, that's of course the case. Now, you also are retaining your entire coaching staff from last season and improving upon it. Offensive coordinator Jeff Nixon is back. Fran Brown is, of course, still here. And they added two really key pieces on the offensive coaching front in wide receivers coach Miles White. Josh Gaddis is here as an offensive sort of consultant. So I think that, the sky's going to be the limit in terms of what they can draw up. It might take a few weeks into next season to kind of see that plan come to life, though.
Final takeaways for you before we wrap it up.
Final takeaways, kind of like I just said, this team is young. Fran Brown even said that post-game, but I think they could be scrappy. I think, of course, you can't ignore the strength of schedule that they're going against, one of the hardest in Power 4 football next season, so we'll certainly see how they handle that. I think 4 or 5 teams that made the college football playoff last year, but in terms of the spring game as a whole, because I know Fran Brown says he likes to take everything week by week and not look ahead to August and not look ahead to Tennessee, I think that this was certainly a good start. Like you said, it's hard to really make any, real takeaways from this team without Collins out there.
Yep. No, I totally agree. And I think what it's going to come down to when we talk about Collins and his performance, yes, obviously the schedule is a part of it. I'm pretty sure the stat I remember seeing is that 5 opponents who they're facing ended last year's season in the AP top 20.
Yeah.
Like, woof. That is not an easy schedule to go up against. But I think with Collins, part of what it's going to come down to, outside of obviously his talent and what he's able to bring from a talent standpoint, is he is younger than Kyle McCord, and he does have less experience. So it's not necessarily a matter of how well he's able to succeed. How is he, and what is he like when he fails? What is his mentality if he does throw an interception? And can they count on him to remain calm and be a leader out there? Because that is what, to the media, he's promised. So we'll see if he delivers on it. Thanks so much for joining us for an Orange Zone Overtime. That's Ashley Wenskoski. I'm Samantha Croston. We'll see you back here next week.